Welcome to Showcase Studio. My name is Michael Wardy, and I want to thank everybody for joining us on this interview today. I want to make a couple of introductions. First, Al Schmidt, who is one of my colleagues here at Source Advisors, where we are working with our clients and CPAs in helping them maximize incentives that are available to them, such as the Research Development Tax Credit, cost segregation, inventory tax planning, and energy efficient incentives. Also, our special guest, welcome Gary Shamis, and we thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here. And Gary, I know you've been involved with a firm that you've grown to the top 40. You've also won multiple awards, and you do a lot of thought leadership from a growth perspective as well. So great to have you. Would love to maybe get a little bit of an introduction for folks that may not be aware of who you are. If you could maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and we can go from there.
Okay, well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. And probably the most interesting thing about me is that I have an undergraduate degree in biology from Tulane University. So go figure that out. Medical school wasn't in my future, and I ended up going to Ohio State and getting a master's in accounting, and I found the light. So I started my career working for one of the big 8 accounting firms. And then from there, I moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, and I joined my dad. And it was virtually a startup. We had a small firm. We had a half a dozen people. We're doing a couple $100,000 worth of business. Over the next 34 years, a long time, I was the managing partner of our little firm, which we grew to be the 37th largest firm in the United States. Sold the firm beginning of 2015 to BDO. BDO, the 5th largest firm in the world. And at that point in time, it was the largest transaction that had ever occurred at BDO. Along the way, there's a lot of pivotal things that happened to move us forward. Really the 3 that I refer to the most is we looked at a geographic expansion. We moved out of Cleveland, and we had offices in Illinois, Kentucky, all throughout Ohio, and in New York City. We focused on a niche strategy, which we'll probably talk a little bit more today. And lastly, what we did is we brought in our service array. We got more into advisory, where we were a firm that was offering multiple types of services to our clients. Subsequent to that, I was at BDO for a short period of time. It wasn't a good fit for me. And I wanted to continue. So 4.5 years ago, I launched Winding River Consulting, it's called a boutique consulting firm, focusing for the majority is on the accounting profession. And we have a program called Managing Partner Bootcamp. We have to date educated 90 people through this course, 90 firms around the world, how to run professional service organization at a managing partner level or on an executive committee level, at that level. And then we also do advisory board work. I sit on about maybe 8 accounting firms' advisory boards. We meet on a regular basis. My colleague does digital marketing, which I believe we'll talk a little bit about today. And then we do some individual projects for firms. We're quite busy these days.
I can imagine. So really, Gary, our topic today is talking about the growth for CPA firms. That's a lot of what you've been doing, and a lot of CPA firms have had to pivot. They've been evolving quite a bit over the years. It's constantly evolving. Really, what worked 5 years ago may not work 2 or 3 years ago, may not work today. So talk to us a little bit about what are successful firms doing today to grow.
So, there has been a lot of changes, but I would say the changes haven't really been pivots. They've been adds, and things have been added on to the array of what firms are looking at. So if you look at it historically, most firms, grew through relationships, building relationships and turning those relationships into clients. And firms had all kinds of strategies on how to develop those relationships. It was things like marketing, business development people, your website. So pretty much every firm was doing things similar in terms of how they built, and this goes back, a really long time. So what are the add-ons? So the add-on that you're seeing in very successful firms today, or a big piece of what they're doing, is the add-on with respect to an M&A strategy. So they actually have a strategy to grow through mergers and acquisitions, or potentially bringing in laterals. This is part of what they're doing. They're trying to seek this these firms that would be additive to them. Now, certainly, you see the publicity on the big firms when that happens. There was just a recent one that happened in the last few days, where Armanino, which is a large San Francisco firm, bought a top 100 firm in St. Louis. They merged with them. So, those are pretty common. But below that radar, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of opportunity for smaller firms to pick up small firms. Why is the opportunity? Well, I think people are understanding the complexities of public accounting today and how complicated it is. So they're looking to get help in terms of doing that. Also, there's succession planning issues where firms just don't have the right people in place to succeed, and they're looking to retrieve the value of their firms through potentially merging or being acquired by a larger firm. So that has become a strategy as well. And pretty much every firm that I work with is on the lookout and has developed some kind of M&A strategy. The third component, which is I would call the new component, is the digital component. And that really has arisen out of the pandemic. You couldn't do relationships through the pandemic. It was hard to maintain relationships. You couldn't see people, other than Zoom, which was awkward. And then, the M&A side of it, how do you buy a firm when you can't even see a firm or be there? So a lot of things became just unusual and awkward. But then really what became really started, excuse me, I'll take these off, which really started to blossom was the whole idea of digital marketing. And what that is using things, social media, SEO positioning with Google, your website, LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn, developing strategies like that to specifically go after specific clients. I've had the luxury to work with a firm right now that has it's a totally virtual firm. They focus on one vertical. They get all their leads through their digital strategy. They're getting 300 leads a month, okay, in terms of what they're doing. Their biggest problem right now is vetting the leads. And they have truly a national practice and a virtual firm to work with that. So just seeing what they're doing in terms of their modeling is, I think it's just really interesting. And probably one of the better things about this is not that hard, because it's not like we're inventing it. It's just like it took a while for it to get to the CPA world. Right. So other companies have been doing this, large companies, for years. So it's really just taking this strategy. And then on the LinkedIn side of it, once I started learning more about this, you really have the ability to dig down deep. If you're trying to build a vertical of plumbers and you only want to do plumbers, you could find them in LinkedIn. Now, you have to get somebody who knows what they're doing. You have to figure out what geographies. You have to pay a little bit of money to do that. But you're able to really drill down to people that you're looking for. And that's like never happened before. And on top of that, too, if you really have a specialty, and you have a niche that's a deep niche, it's a way to grow your niche potentially outside of your region. Most firms before the pandemic, if you looked at the geography of their clients, 90% of their clients were probably within 30 miles of their physical location. Why does they have to be like that anymore? I mean, we serviced these clients in a virtual setting over the last 15 months. Why can't we be doing that going forward? And the answer is we can. And if that's the case, and if you're working out of Cleveland, Ohio, like I am, why can't you have a client in Seattle? I mean, there's nothing to really stop you from doing that, other than maybe some awkwardness in dealing with the time zone differences.
So, Gary, I have a quick question for you. The traditional model, and when we talk with CPAs, they always say, when we ask them how you get new clients, they always say, well, we only get referrals. it sounds like that traditional model, while it still works, it's kind of a stagnant approach that's not going to get firms to the next tiers and next levels that they need to be at. They need to start focusing on this social media aspect. Is that
Well,
accurate?
I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, you know, if you don't want to, you know, I mean, that avenue is still there. Referrals from clients, you know, relationship building within your community, you know, that's all still there. And I think that's just one of the focuses. That's one of these three prongs. You know, prong two is this opportunity through this digital marketing and LinkedIn, and prong three would be an M&A strategy.
Got it. Got it.
So Gary, can you give us some examples of firms that are really knocking it out of the park?
Well, yeah, I can. But so if you go through those three channels there in terms of relationships, no, I can't, because that, that's the firm that's growing, 4 to 6 to 8% a year. That's the firm that, is really doing things the old ways. So they're going to have limitations in how they're going to be able to move forward. But I think, those firms, even from a defensive strategy, really have to think about what's happening out there, because there's no reason why their clients right now can't be attacked by a firm in Seattle if they're in Cleveland, vice versa. So there is some defensive to that. But in terms of the M&A strategy, I mean, it's not hard to see. I mean, big firms, look at BDO. When BDO acquired our firm in 2015, they were, I think the number was just slightly less than $600 million in revenue. Now I think they're in the $2 billion range. They've had some organic growth, yes, but they've had an incredible M&A strategy. I mean, I could probably list 5 to 10 firms, anywhere from $50 to $100 million that they acquired. That's significant. Okay.
Right.
You look at the larger firms in the country, you look at the Eisner Ampers, you look at the Markhams, you look at the CLAs. I mean, these firms have grown their footprint by M&A throughout the country. Now, the larger firms that are pretty much filled out, or they think that they're filled out in terms of the geography, if you kind of look at where they're making acquisitions right now, they're really making acquisitions really based upon adding advisory services through their distribution model. So they have somewhat changed. Smaller firms, I work with, I sit on the board of really just a couple really great firms. One of the firms named is Strothman out of Louisville. Another firm is Apple Growth Partners out of Cleveland. Apple's done 4 or 5 of these kind of mergers with smaller firms, $1 to $3 million. Strothman, the same, have done some deals with smaller firms of that nature. So there's plenty of examples, in terms of the M&A side of the world. They get publicized, there's lots of examples. In terms of the digital, there's probably not a better example than the firm that I was talking about before. This is a firm that had an 80% growth in one vertical, and their entire growth was based upon their digital presence. This was not based upon relationship. This was based upon people using SEO, saying that they want to find, the best farming CPA, and they click on, and the first one that pops up is Al Schmidt's CPA Firm. And they'll go and check out their webpage, and they have a very inviting webpage that allows them to connect, and boom, you have 300 opportunities. So how do you vet those opportunities? This particular firm, what they do is they actually do some of the vetting on their website. So if you want to go contact them in advance, they're going to ask you some things. They're going to ask you if you're a qualified investor. They're going to ask you how many tax returns do you do. They're going to ask you how long you've been in business. So when that ask comes through to them, and these 300 asks come through to them, they could say, well, this is not the kind of client. It's not a good fit. So they just try and narrow it down and go over the ones that are going to be good fits for their practice. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think back in my organization, we were famous for building our restaurant practice, it was fabulous. We did a great job at it. We had 500 restaurant clients coast to coast. We were Ohio-based, and only 20% of our restaurants were in Ohio.
Wow.
So I think back to how difficult it was for us to grow that versus the opportunities you could have today, and how much easier it would be. Just for example, we went to San Diego and ended up picking up the largest restaurant group in San Diego. And, they looked at us and they knew we were the best firm, but how does this work? How are you going to service us when you're in Cleveland? and so it was customary that we would have to see them. So we get on a plane, go see them. Well, the customs have changed. Now we
Yeah.
could service that client through a Zoom relationship. We really don't even have to be there anymore. You want to be there once in a while to maintain a relationship, but it's very different how that works.
Yeah.
I find it incredible how, because CPA firms are not traditionally the first ones to jump on to new processes and new ideas. And I feel like we're seeing more and more of that because they're recognizing that they have to continue to be in business. It's amazing what the evolution that's happened. It's happening quicker.
Yeah, well, I wrote an article in Accounting Today. This was pandemic related article, and I said that who's running the firm in 2030, and I said it's the same person who was running it in 2020, because we went to bed on March 17th, 2020, and we woke up on March 18th, and it was 2030. And what happened was, 10 years of evolution happened in one day, and that's really true. Yeah. And we were ready for it, but it really pushed us, that much forward that quickly. And along with that, came the challenges of how do you grow an organization or the opportunities to grow one. In the beginning, when I looked at this thing, I looked at it, just my nature. I looked at it opportunistically. I said, boy, if I had a firm today, what a great opportunity, because what I could do is I could hire people all over the country right now. I know how to manage them. They could work for me. I could have clients all over the country. And then you start looking at this and you realize from a defensive standpoint, this is a little dangerous, because I could lose my people too to a firm in California, or I could lose a client to another firm that has a deep expertise in an area that I'm not as expert in. So there's also a defensive mode to understanding, where this is going to go quickly. One thing that I'm kind of finding, and I find this really interesting. So my colleague, David Toth, he's done an amazing job, and his focus is this digital marketing. And he can really help firms get lined up as to how to do this. Now, we don't have enough depth in my organization to be in execution. So we could tell people how to do it. We might be able to help them. We might be able to bring in other contractors to help in the execution. But what we're finding is that firms that have existing marketing groups, they are trying really hard not to let David in discussions with us, because the idea is, or the thought is they're supposed to already be doing this, and they're not. One of my clients that we were talking about has an expertise in a specific industry, and car wash industry, and they want to grow it nationally. And I've made suggestions that we need to, maybe we could help you. And they say, oh, no, your marketing people, they don't want you in. So I go SEO and I look for car wash CPAs. They're not even on the list. We find them 3 pages down. No one will ever look at them. So they're really not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there's always this hesitation to change, or critique in terms of what you're doing that stands in the way.
And you've mentioned several times, verticals. I know you're passionate about that. That's one of the things that you really like to talk about. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that as far as the growth strategy. Yeah,
I'll give you the history. The history is pretty simple. It's really simple. It was in the late 90s. I was in Toronto. My wife and I were there. I can't even remember what we were there for, but we were walking through a bookstore. And then in the bookstore, I saw a book. It was called, it was a book called The Turbocharged Company. And I looked at the book, and the author was a guy named Larry Goddard. And I know a Larry Goddard. So I said, same Larry Goddard I know. So I opened up the book, in the sleeve was his picture, and it was the same Larry Goddard I know. He had written the book with another individual. So I picked up the book, read the book. Really fast forward, I'll move back in a second, but we ended up acquiring Larry's consulting firm, so he became a part of SS&G before we had sold the BDO. But I read the book, and the book was really talking about something called strategic competitive advantage, which is verticals. And what that meant to me was in a situation where you were proposing or bidding on trying to get work, you had an advantage over the competitors. And so before even the process started, you had an advantage. And that's how we looked at strategic competitive advantage. And that's how we looked at the verticals within our organization. We felt that we would have a better chance to get clients and close clients if we used our energies to try and channel them into the verticals that we were really outstanding at and we could really show that we were better at. So in 1999, we made this transition from being a very generalist firm to begin focusing on these different verticals. We focused on maybe 6 verticals. And in 1999, we were doing $12 million, our total, all of our businesses together. When we sold the BDO in 2015, we were approaching $100 million. So in a 15-year period of time, we had grown $88 million. And the reason that we had this huge growth was almost predominantly based upon focusing on these verticals and having an incredible win rate. Most firms, if they're honest and you look at their proposals, most firms will be maybe they win 20, 30%, 40% of what they're bidding at, because there's always other firms. The other firms are always going to stack up well, and there's going to be reasons why they won't go with you or reasons why they will that may not even be understood. But the difference for us was we were able to close in the restaurant space probably 95% of the things we proposed on. So we were out there, the marketing was bringing it to us, it would come to us, and we closed 95%. It was just amazing. It was hard not to get a client. And then pricing really wasn't as much of an issue. So I really believe in the vertical strategy for strategic competitive advantage, places that you could really do better. In order to do that, number one is you got to have somebody who's a champion and passionate about it. It's just not going to happen unless you have a leader. That's why they need to come to Managing Partner Boot Camp, so they can become a leader and understand, how to lead an organization like that. The person's got to be passionate. They got to really like the industry. And then, I think firms sometimes don't even realize that they have verticals. And I think that what they do is if they just take an inventory of what they're doing, they may find out. And verticals don't always have to be industries either. They could also be service lines. It could be international tax. It could be cybersecurity. So you could actually build verticals that could be through service lines as well too. So some of the challenges of that is I had 33 partners, and not all of them were verticals, and a couple of them remained generalists. And some of the challenge was disenfranchising those partners from our marketing effort. And saying, well, I understand you have an opportunity to get a car dealership, but the chances of us getting that are really slim because we don't do any other car dealerships. We're going to be using mirrors to try and create the fact that we can do the work. So I'm sorry, but the marketing department can only support you, in based upon the opportunities that we have here. So don't expect much from us. If you want to get it, great. I hope you get it, but we're better off doing the proposal for the next restaurant practice. Restaurant client.
Yeah. So once you made that transition to focusing on verticals, how did that play into your M&A activity?
Well, we were not M&A driven as an organization. If you look at our total revenues and you work back on the M&A side of where we picked up M&A, for us it was probably 15 or 20%. So most of our growth was organic, but we did have expansion. And, I was the managing partner, so I had obviously more influence than anyone. And if you would have asked me privately, and I may have told people differently publicly, but privately, we were looking to grow through an M&A strategy based upon growing our restaurant practice. That was the sole purpose.
Yeah.
So after we were really situated throughout Ohio, which was pretty, we got to be the second largest firm in Ohio next to EY in Ohio. We ended up in 2 cities. We ended up in Chicago, New York. I mean, you can only imagine those are fabulous restaurant cities. So that's why we wanted to be there. Right. And right before we had sold, we were looking to move to Atlanta. We were looking to acquire a firm in Atlanta. It was a small firm, was about $3 or $4 million in business, but we wanted a foothold there. And the one place we were unsuccessful in getting a foothold was Southern California. I really wanted to be in Southern California. There's a spot in Southern California. I'm not sure where the spot is, but if you get to the spot and you draw a 100-mile radius, okay, you hit 10% of the restaurants in the United States.
Wow.
So significant amount of restaurants in Southern California. So over the years before we merged, I must have talked to 10 firms in Southern California, trying to find the right firm to merge. And we just weren't able to execute on that. If we would not have sold, we would not have given up. And I'm pretty sure today SS&G would have offices in Atlanta and probably either Los Angeles or San Diego. Now the other spot, if you're going to do it, you guys don't know the industry, but if you would do it, the other spot would be Dallas. So then you're covering all the major restaurant hubs in the country where there's either the corporate offices of large groups or franchisors located.
Well, good. So Gary, what would you leave us with? How would you? Do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, let me give you my thinking on just firms and growing. We've talked a lot about strategy. I mean, you've asked me, how are firms growing today? And these are how firms are growing today. These are the strategies they're using. They're using M&A. They have a digital piece to it. Some of them still have the relation side. We talked about verticals. Strategy isn't hard. In the last, whatever it is, half hour or so, we covered, a significant amount of the strategies you would use to grow an organization. Now, I don't have all of them, and there's certainly more of them that you could add to this. And, other firms, may have some innovative ways to do this. So strategy isn't hard. What's really hard is execution. I was in Alabama doing some work on Monday. I was with the firm there that was the third largest firm in Alabama. And we were talking about how many firms are there in Alabama? I don't know, maybe there's 1,000 firms, and this firm was the third largest. Well, the smallest firm or any of those other 1,000 firms have the same access to strategy as the third largest firm. I mean, they could listen to this webcast or whatever, how this is going to be distributed. They could hire me. They could go to a conference. They could read a book. Okay. It's not hard to figure out what the strategy is. But the reason this firm was number 3 and these other firms hadn't grown was because of the execution of the strategy. So that's the biggest element in public accounting. We were really successful at SS&G because we were able to execute. BDO was really successful because they were able to execute an M&A strategy. So firms, and if they want to go forward, they need to leave time for execution. And that's where I've come to the belief that if you're the managing partner of any kind of specific size firm and you want to grow, then you better not have a whole lot of clients. I mean, you need to focus your time on the execution on growing your firm rather than a client. I say, well, if you spend an hour on a client, and you bill $400, how much money could you make on that? I don't know, $133. Okay. But if you spend that hour influencing how 100 other people are going to go forward and produce, it could be worth a lot more than $133. So to me, it's always about the execution. And the people leading the organization have just got to be able to generate enough time to properly execute. So that is consistent for me forever. Okay, so that's how I that would be my parting words.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, we certainly appreciate you joining us today. It was a lot of great information, and I know folks will certainly be able to get a lot out of that. So, if you want to reach out to Gary, we'll certainly have some contact information in there. And if there's anything we can also do, Michael, you have any parting words as well?
Yeah. Well, I guess just it's definitely mind-opening and more eye-opening than anything else to see the evolution, and since the pandemic and what's happened with offices closing, how firms are acknowledging that they have to change. And Gary, because you guys are on the forefront of supporting that change, you're a great resource for any firm that says, what are we going to do to survive for the next 2 to 5 years even? Contacting you, I would think, would be one of the first steps, in my opinion, to make sure that you have a plan in place and know how to do it the right way. Because it's not like you said, it's not like it used to be anymore. there's a
Yeah,
lot of
and that's what our primary focus is. We prefer to sell strategy, not execution.
Mhm.
So our engagements are usually not very time consuming, not very long. Okay. And not incredibly expensive because we don't spend that much time on it. Some of the expense may be on the execution in terms of
Sure.
finding people to do a LinkedIn strategy, redoing your website and things like that. But all we're trying to do is get firms channeled the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. And they need it. They definitely need it. So Gary, thank you again for
Thank
joining.
you.
We appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right. Thanks, Gary.